whenever I speak to Martin Ziegler, either in the editing capacity or on the Game podcast, he always talks about FIFA being Infantino's life. This is what he's got. He mixes in such high echelons of society these days. He's friends with the President of the United States. I mean, it doesn't get any higher than that. So he will cling on to this job for as long as possible. And I think even if it is a smaller country, we might sit here and weigh it up against the English FA and UEFA. But if he's getting any kind of support, he will go, well, there people are still out there who back me.
UEFA are doubling down on their threat to boycott all FIFA competitions. The president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, he has apologised for his plan to sell stakes in the World Cup, and Tom Clarke can get us right up to date, the Times sports editor and the host of the Game podcast. Hi to you, Tom.
Afternoon, John.
Good to have you here, Tom. Could you just give us the latest on Infantino's rearguard defence against his critics?
Yes, so this was yesterday. He put out an apology, pretty rare, I would say, an admission of his mistakes and things like that, which that is the exact word he used. But it's not gone far enough. Infantino, he said he wanted to restore confidence in the organisation, acknowledging the mistakes that had been made. Certainly apologise for these errors and commit to them not happening again. With this in mind, we will conduct a necessary review and a report presented to the FIFA Council at its next scheduled meeting. I think the hope from Infantino and the people close to him would be enough. That would calm things down. That would show a bit of humility. Yes, we got this one wrong. Yes, let's keep going. Let's move forward. Of course, as myself and all the colleagues have mentioned on your show, there's these elections looming next year in early 2027. I think the hope is that we can at least get through to then. Not quit, not walk away. But as you say, there, UEFA doubling down this afternoon.
I can't wait to read a report into what happened and what went wrong.
Yeah.
Detailing, no doubt, exactly how Gianni Infantino cooked this scheme up behind the backs of all his most senior colleagues and the FAs around the world, and who he cooked it up with. I'm sure that'll be spelled out in great detail.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a report conducted by the people who did the bad efforts in the first place, exactly as you say. I mean, I think that is a really interesting point amongst all of this, and I keep coming back to it in our chats with Martin Ziegler on the Game podcast and things, is such bad planning and such bad preparation, not to include such senior figures, Arsene Wenger, chief operating officers and things like that. But as you say, at this moment in this afternoon, UEFA has laid down the gauntlet. That's the intro to Martin Ziegler's piece on the Times website now, by saying that it's boycott, that it obviously came out with last week in response to the plans. It still stands.
Yes. It would be very odd if it didn't. It'd be odd if they were to back down from all of that. That's the ultimate piece of pressure, isn't it? And meanwhile, there was, in this FIFA statement that we had overnight, we had FIFA warning, if warning is the word, that it will defend its reputation from here on after ending the plan to sell the World Cup. Maybe, I don't know if they imagine, Tom, that that's going to silence the criticism, but of course it won't.
No, absolutely not. And it does feel like it's growing day by day. It was interesting yesterday, of course, we had Luis Figo, a great of the game and someone who's been involved in UEFA in the kind of, and had views into the technical side of things. You think he's been an advisor at the game at a high level, talking about why Infantino has to go, why things have got to move. And in terms of not backing down, UEFA, they make the point that they had two stances with their boycott. First, the proposals to sell the competition had to be withdrawn, and obviously that happened. But secondly, they've stressed again, assurances have to be made that such attempts to disfigure the game in this way will never be made again. And I think that's such a striking second point to reiterate, and kind of direct it at Gianni Infantino and say, look, we don't trust you to still be there, to not try something like this again.
Right. And I was just seeing ahead of the show, Tom, the Confederation of African Football is holding its executive committee meeting today. And look, there are supporters in that Confederation of African FAs for the FIFA position and for, I suppose, Gianni Infantino. Now, how does that weigh in the calculations of the odds on Infantino carrying on? Does it weigh at all?
I think it probably does weigh a bit, because at least I think in his position, when he's got the idea that I am still the right person for the job, I think that there is a kind of level of delusion, if you like, here, that I am still the right person for this job. It's interesting, whenever I speak to Martin Ziegler, either in the editing capacity or on the Game podcast, he always talks about FIFA being Infantino's life. This is what he's got. He mixes in such high echelons of society these days. He's friends with the President of the United States. I mean, it doesn't get any higher than that. So he will cling on to this job for as long as possible. And I think even if it is a smaller country, we might sit here and weigh it up against the English FA and UEFA. But if he's getting any kind of support, he will go, well, there people are still out there who back me. And I think there's another interesting point to that as well. If he gets at least a little bit of encouragement, the other thing Martin Ziegler keeps saying is, well, why would he quit? Why would he go unless he's really, really backed into a corner? Because he can keep pushing towards these elections, see if he can get through the next bit. But this chapter this afternoon with UEFA doubling down on the boycott feels quite significant, really.
Right. And when it comes to FIFA, as it votes, when all of the football associations of the world get together and vote on a thing like electing or not a new president, every FA has a single vote, don't they? So even a powerful FA like the English FA counts exactly the same in that vote as, say, the FA of a small Caribbean island. But even that said, and even when you look at the fact that in African football, some of those smaller FAs, they are not rich, and they would have been thinking hard about what they need from FIFA and Infantino by way of revenue, just to keep their game going and help it grow. He just doesn't have the numbers.
No, absolutely not. And I think there would be a concerted effort, I'm sure there are probably movements already being made, that if we did trundle towards an election where Infantino was still a candidate, all the other federations would put up very much a unity candidate, someone who could unite everyone together. There would be no split vote or anything like that. There'd be no ructions of any kind. It would be a unity candidate that everyone else could get behind, and they would seek to appeal to those smaller nations as well. But I mean, I keep stressing again what an interesting moment this UEFA statement is. We've got an under-20s World Cup qualifiers in a couple of weeks, under-20 Women's World Cup, in Poland, which European teams are set to be a part of. So with UEFA doubling down, it sets the clock running again for that tournament, because at the minute we'd be going into the under-20 Women's World Cup with no European nations.
You can really hear the clock ticking, can't you? And look, even if Infantino, Tom, is playing a losing game, South America is still a trump card.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if South America is a trump card in his hand, but are we still waiting to see where they stand?
They're still waiting to hear from quite a lot of nations, actually, and that's really an interesting part of this. We've had a lot of nations not quite go as far as UEFA. A lot of nations express disappointment and various, phrases like that. Always interesting in the language used, but no, not many have actually gone as far as UEFA and said, no, we're out until you sort this out. A lot of people expressing dismay and disappointment. So it'll be interesting to see now, with the UEFA boycott pushing the pressure back on him and on FIFA, whether any other nations and federations will rally around him, whether there'll be a bit of a fight back. But so it's a constantly moving story all the time. Every time I speak to Martin Ziegler, it feels like a moment has happened and then another one comes along.
Right, well, when the next one comes along, if I'm still here, do drop by.
Absolutely.
The door's always open. Tom Clarke, thanks so much for that update. Tom Clarke, who is the Times sports editor and the host of the Game podcast.